Is Gary Merchant, Chair. Gary Merchant, Chair of the Prescription Drug Affordability Board. It's now November 3rd, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I will now ask for introductions to my other board members.
Todd Fahey, member of the board.
Jim Murphy, member of the board.
Bob Woodward, I guess I'm an alternative member of the board.
Okay, thank you for that, gentlemen. Given the fact that we have three assigned board members here, we now have a quorum, so we have established a quorum. For the agenda review, it's simple today. It was only to go over the board rules and talk about it, possible discussion about the annual report, which now is due. We'll be hopefully working with Bob to give you some idea of what we've been working on and hopefully get something to the board members later this month. So in saying that with board rules, if you will, I could invite Mike
Yes, that's it.
up to the, oh, there's Bob. We're just getting started. Great. So we've done a lot of work with Ms. Radney, also with Mr. Berry, he's not here, but as well. So based upon a lot of the board input that we've had, we went through and revised certain things. And at this point in time, hopefully this is the last iteration of the rules, and we can get it off the Del Car meeting with them on November 17th.
We're trying. For the record, Allison Radman, and I am the administrator of the department. We will start, this should go pretty quickly. We will start on page 3. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm looking at page 3. For everyone else, page 8. And you'll see changes in line 16 through 18.
And then there were some changes.
Yeah, no, you have it right. I'm looking on.
This is one.
So that was one that was in,
May want to just go back and double check.
oh, go back and do all of the,
Just
okay.
the one that we changed before and the one now changing. So if you're on the side of the back, we didn't make some changes.
Okay.
So the
All right,
audience
so I don't have those ones out.
I can,
Okay.
sure thing.
So then, starting on page 2, I'm sorry. There's a change in line 34 and 35. 2 weeks was changed to 14 days. Based on a previous OLS comment, we have elected all of our timeframes now will be in days versus just saying weeks, and we have made those changes throughout the rule, just for clarity. You will see another change on line 35 shall. I'm assuming that was response to a May that we had in there. Yeah. So they have requested that we change that to shall, and again, there was a couple Mays that were throughout the rule that have been changed to those shalls. On page 4, line 31. This goes back to changing the weeks to days, and we just want to define day. On page 5, line 39. OLS had made a comment about a reasonable, what is the time frame for reasonable? We narrowed that down to a 10-day notice to provide pardons.
And the rationale for the 10 days was the fact that the board meetings have to be noticed 14 days. So it gives them time to respond to it. To still meet the 10 or the 4 meeting deadlines. So we felt 10 days was sufficient.
Same page, page 5, line 52. We changed the 2 weeks to 10 days because the board meetings are noticed 2 weeks in advance. There was a comment and we realized that nobody could let us know exactly that they wanted to attend. So we gave them a 10-day time frame for that. Page 6, the board shall, I'm sorry, line 4, we remove retained sole discretion. 2, Olas had made a comment, the board at its own agenda. We don't need discretion for that. We can't do that. So we have removed that for OLS. Same page, page 6, line 38. We removed suspend. We have determined based on further discussions, disqualified and suspended really means the same thing for this board. So we removed suspend and we are keeping disqualified.
Line 24 as well.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yep. We also removed or suspension from the section header on page on line 24. Yeah.
Remove the whole thing about remote.
Oh, yeah, page 7, section 20201, starting on line 17. We removed all criteria for remote hearings and proceedings for the board. Everything will be in person. They really wanted us to come up with quite a bit of criteria surrounding that. And we really want to get this on the books first. So we need to go into further rulemaking, but at this time we in person only.
Is that to establish quorum or can you still view from?
This
outside?
is for appeals only.
For appeals
Yeah.
only. Okay. Oh, I see, yes.
Same page, page 7, starting on line 49, section 20202. We added reasons why the board can issue notice and impose a civil fine. We also added that fines cannot exceed a total of $25,000 for any occurrence, and I believe that came straight from the statute. Okay, so page 8, lines 16 through 18. This was based on a comment from OLS on our conditional approval request. So this is a new comment that we are addressing. And it is, they are asking us to add information or requirements surrounding the proof in the standards of proof and the burden of proof. What we did is, sorry, okay, so in working with Rob, we changed paragraph F. So that would be,
Page in which line?
I'm sorry, page 8, line 16, 17, and 18. So Rob had taken a look at this and we kind of reworded a little bit to make a little bit clearer. I did email the OLS attorney to see if this information was sufficient to remove this comment. At this time, she has not gotten back to me. She was out last week. And again, I haven't heard anything to my follow-ups this past week.
So my understanding, talking to both you and to Rob, Attorney Barry, the board is the one that has the requirement to prove something, not the party that's being fined. The preponderance of evidence support has to come from the board, not from the other party.
That's my understanding.
Right.
That's correct.
So we wanted to be clear in the rules that the requirement for finding something is on the board, not the litigant.
Correct.
Okay, so we're going to look on the same page, that's page 8, line 36 through 38. This change is based on, again, a new comment from OLS on our conditional approval request. It states based on the language of J above, about the amount of fine, it appears K should be amended to add at the end or adjust the amount of the civil fine. We agreed with that after discussions and have added that into the rule that based on further evidence, the board can withdraw, uphold, or adjust the amount of the fine if needed. Okay, so page 10. I'm going to line 34 and 35. This was a comment that we addressed in our conditional approval request. We removed the board may but not need to reply to motions. The board will in some way reply to motions. So we didn't have to state that. So that was removed. And that was also per an OLS suggestion. Line 40, we changed shall, may to shall. Again, it was just one of the mays that we didn't catch. On page 11, line 7, that was an edit slash unclear comment on this new document that we filed, the conditional approval request that we're addressing for the first time here. It was just an incorrect citation when we had gone and renumbered some of the rules. We didn't catch that one. OLS caught it and noted it, so we were able to make that change. Line 9 on the same page, instead of is, we replaced it with shall be, just for proper rulemaking.
What else? Highlight
There we go.
26.
Paragraph H, line 26 on page 11. We changed shall, must to shall, again, just a format. Okay, so page 12. Line 41 for 43. We struck out everything after board on line 41. So part of the record is just staff memoranda or data submitted to the board. There was no exceptions at that time, so we removed that, and that was based off an OLS comment on our final proposal. So we're in the conditional approval request. New to this document, the amended conditional approval request is line 47. We added this base that stated it is not just the marking of the document as confidential that makes it confidential. It also has to meet the requirements of 91A. The language here appears to suggest that it will be confidential if it is identified as confidential. Consider inserting after PDAB 20102D the language that in accordance with RSA 91A5 rather than in the middle of the sentence. So really just to make it more clear.
Just caught this.
Oh, sure.
It says here 910.
Oh,
Delete the 0.
yep. Yeah. Dash. Thank you. So that language just kind of switched around for better clarity. Page 14, line 8, this was addressed in the conditional approval request that we filed previously. We added to the New Hampshire Supreme Court for appeals. Line 23 and 24 of the same page, paragraph C. We removed by quorum vote of the members of the board because the board has to do everything by quorum vote as is.
Does that, can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
It doesn't say how the board shall stay the final order. But is it automatic or is there a vote? Right, or am I missing something? If the board becomes aware of additional information that was unavailable or was not discovered prior to the hearing, the board shall stay the final, so it's just automatic that the board stays the final order?
It would be by a vote of the board, whether to stay the order.
But this is saying that they just automatically stay the order.
Well, the standard is in C. We originally had, of course, by a vote. And I think of the comments that has to take that are correct, if you assume that it is a vote.
So I just don't, what it says right now is that the board will stay the final order, no matter what.
Oh, I get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you're saying.
So maybe would it be by a vote of the members of the board and take out the word quorum? Is that what OLS was really looking for us to do?
So because the board has to have a quorum vote.
I
anyway,
understand why quorum's coming out. But what it's saying right now is that automatically, if the board becomes aware of additional information, the board stays the final order.
No matter what, okay.
So
Oh,
is
okay,
it?
so you want the
is-
option to vote on it.
Well, I'm just, I don't know. I'm asking a question. Should we have the option to vote on it or should it be automatic?
The intent should be that the board should have the ability to vote on it based on whether it feels it meets this criteria.
So what I'm suggesting is that you just take out the word quorum of the members of the board. If the reason quorum, that phrase came out was that everything requires a quorum anyway.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm understanding that, yeah. I might have over deleted there.
Well. No, so we get nitpicky here, but it doesn't say whether it's a positive or negative. This is
We can add some language to that effect as well.
just the fact that you took a vote.
That's right.
It was 3-2, but that's okay. Yeah,
We'll play around with that language to make it clear.
We have to come up with something now because we have
Yeah.
to vote on it.
By affirmative vote.
By affirmative vote, there you go.
There you go. Thank
By
you, John.
an affirmative vote of the members of the board.
Yes.
Can I comment on this, Mr. Chairman? It seems like the board should have the ability to either stay the final order or change it. And this only gives the board the ability to stay the final order, but not to change it.
Would it be for reconsideration? Is that, if you're staying it, are you staying it just saying we're not going to do it? Or are we sending it back for reconsideration? Is that automatic?
Typically, stay of an order is for the purpose of reconsideration, and we do contemplate that in this section, I believe.
So can I, so back to that, Senator Roosevelt,
Yes,
so what if we put down the board shall stay the final order for reconsideration by affirmative vote of the board?
yeah, I think that is more clear.
Is there anything else, Senator Roosevelt? Senator Roosevelt, is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so we're going, next page, page 15. This was initially changed, because OLS had a comment that it appeared to conflict with RSA 541A29, which requires agencies to give an opportunity for the petitioner to correct any apparent errors or omissions.
It's line.
Oh, I apologize, this is
One,
line
two.
2.
Okay.
Yep, and also, same comment, it's going to address line 25 as well. We initially changed that because we received this comment on our final proposal to try to address that a little bit, but also not really changing the context of it because after looking at the RSA, we disagreed. It was inaccurate. I did speak with OLS and the RSA does say that with the exception to declaratory rulings. So 51829 does not apply here. After speaking with OLS, they have removed that comment. So we have kept the language that we changed to just for a little more clarity. But they have removed the substantive comment that will prevent this from moving forward. Okay.
39.
Oh, so that was just a note, so I'm gonna go further down.
Okay.
For that one, yeah. So we're going to change or go to page 16. First change is line 1. We just added the in front of name to make it read a little bit better. The biggest change in part to a comment from OLS on our conditional approval request starts on page 25 and it goes all the way through the end of the next page. What we did is we had a comment that we needed rulemaking surrounded your public comment hearings. So the hearing that is really run in the rulemaking process, not your typical board hearing, but the one that we had on these rules that I ran at the front and we did that. So this section, the new PDAP 206, is that process. When I had done, I had looked at the Milk Sanitation Board rules, as well as the department rules, where the department or the board is administratively attached to the department, and it would be our unit here running the hearings. So I kind of combined the two and added them for yours. So you abide by the same rules that I abide by for the department hearings. Nothing has to change, and we don't have to worry about any process having to be different for the rules unit here, which is nice. So that brings us through the end of the 200s.
Can I tell you on page 16, line 35, there's just a typo in front of the RSA.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's a new kind of RSA.
I made it up.
It's the exceptional version.
That's right. Extra special.
So the next changes will be on page 1, technically on the 300. Starting on line 13 through 25. And I apologize, I don't have this official comment. So this was a comment we received from OLS prior. And it was actually more of a note to the JLCR committee, just really outlining what we're supposed to be doing here for the RSA. We did break it out a little bit to make it more readable and more clear. That the content really didn't change. Again, it was just broken out into, instead of one big long B paragraph, more broken out to B 1, 2, and 3. OLS at this go around did not have any comment to that, other than still the note to JLCR, but they have no objections.
If this may be a time, Ms. Kroll, you had talked about before under lines 34 through 37. The concern was maybe trying to wordsmith it so it read more clearly or concisely. Some of it seemed to be redundant. Any thoughts on how we could do that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My kind of question, I guess, was simply that I'm starting on line 35 where there's this an if statement that begins and it runs all the way through line 37 to the word through the word contrary. I'm just it's just hanging in the middle of the paragraph, but it doesn't seem to make sense there. I think the paragraph would make sense if you just said the board shall consider the following data to accomplish its duties in A through D of this section. And then you go all the way to the word including, and then you have a list. So I think the whole if statement, first of all, doesn't have a then, it's just an if statement. And it, you know, it seemed to be a holdover from something else. It wasn't making sense to me. But
You must have learned Fortran. in the past. A do loop and an if button. I'm predating.
Yeah, okay.
Computer nerds know what I'm talking about.
Any thoughts?
So my suggestion was just to strike it, but
Strike it all together.
thank you.
If you're okay with striking it, I'm not the one to make the call in the context.
I'm looking for a couple of other heads around the table.
I'm a little more, I'm a little more focused on lines 23 to 25. And perhaps I'm just not remembering, but we're mandating now this is going to require us to determine spending targets based upon these criteria. It's mandatory. So I just want to make sure, does B3 comes directly out of the statute? An adjusted spending target based on projected savings. Which might include. So, you know. The concern is just getting hemmed in to a methodology for our recommendations that is more restricted than the statute anticipates. And I just don't have my notes about how that piece came to be.
Also,
Oh, Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you. I was just going to point out that on line 24, and I think it was just pointed out, might should be may.
That's your person.
no, I think might is appropriate in this instance.
It's the subjunctive.
Yeah.
I love the subjunctive.
I don't think I've ever
There.
seen
I gotta
that.
Fortran subjunctives.
I apologize. What could we say, which shall include but not be limited to?
I think might covers it.
Might
Might
is fine, and
conditional.
OLS is,
Is it okay with it?
they're fine with
Then
it,
let's
yeah.
leave it alone.
Should have would have covered since might is conditional for
Yeah.
May.
Senator Rosenwald, is that okay?
That we leave it as might.
Mike,
I mean, I guess if OLS likes it, I think it's weird. But
So there's certain instances where you use may versus might versus may. One is used for, more of an agency discretion. One is more used for an all over discretion. So this is that case. So we wouldn't use may here, we would use might instead. And I promise you, OLS would say something if they felt otherwise.
all right,
so back to the question you asked before, Todd. What's in the statute is the 10-year rolling average, which is what we say here in Department of Labor. Also, percentage for inflation, and also the adjustments for lowering the spending targets based upon projected savings. We sort of define what that may be as far as drug rebates, lower medical costs and so forth. So it's coming out of
Or
Take
the
a look at
statute?
a statute.
Okay.
We just took the word in here where it says the medical cost. Inflation minus the spending target for savings. It doesn't really define what savings is. So we took and said, okay, savings can come from multiple avenues. One could be from rebates, one could be lower medical cost. As well, it could be from drug utilization. A little more meat, what they call meat on the bones.
Going back to Heidi's.
Yeah.
If I could,
Sure.
where did this come from?
No, go.
35 to 37. Is it in, it's not in statute.
No, it's not. But this is back to one of the comments we heard before is what's the methodology we're gonna use in order to get there? This is basically what we're looking for data. To accomplish its duties. This is sort of outlining the data sets that we're gonna consider.
But where did it come from?
That I don't know. It didn't come from the statute, it's not in the statute.
So we don't know where it came from?
So, yeah, that makes it optional though. That's what we're getting at.
The if statement still seems a little bit strange.
It's an
If
odd-
we're trying to establish what the data might be.
Right.
You know, I don't see that that's necessary. Provide the data from information.
Because later on, what we went back to and we talked about, which is on page 2 on line 5 and 7, this is back to ensure that the database would include all payers claim database, but not only, it'd be not to include, but not limited to.
So really what's happening in this section E.
Yeah.
Is it saying everything that we're including all of this 1 through 7. If a public payer's prescription drug spending data provided to the board by the third party administrator or insurer for the public payers. It's a non-sentence.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yeah, I'm trying to, what page is that?
page 1 on lines 34, 35, 36, and 37. It's not, it's page of section 300 starts with page 1 all over again.
But we scratch it.
I think it's just scratch it.
I'm not finding that on page 1.
No,
Second page.
it's
It's page 1, section 3.
page 1 after page
300.
17.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm not finding it.
It's towards the end of the document.
Yeah, go to page 17.
Oh,
And it's on the back of page 17.
Oh,
The one after.
I thought you
So
said page
it
1.
should be
17-1, yeah, or 18 then.
One of these days I'll get the formatting right.
Good pickup.
Yeah.
That is great.
Yeah.
It's like leftover.
The dangling part.
Not even that.
It's really dangling.
I'm surprised that this was an OLS test. And then this-
They missed it, they sure did.
So are we okay to strike this?
Well,
I don't see an issue not to.
striking from if to.
Contrary,
Comma.
the comma.
Of the section.
Weird.
Just so I have it correctly, I can add it to my draft. It should read moving forward. The board shall consider the following data to accomplish its duties in A through D of this section, including.
Right.
Exactly. Is anyone objecting to that?
Did you find it, Senator Roosevelt?
Find it, Senator Roosevelt?
That's E.
Yes.
Yes.
And what's the issue?
We'd like to strike on 35 from the word if all the way down to contrary. It's doesn't appear to be necessary and actually rather confusing.
You want to just eliminate those phrases?
Yes,
Yeah,
Why do you need including? Even,
Because you don't want to be.
That goes, it's just kind of an intro to your list.
But
It
it
says-
also allow, if you have including, it's not limited to that.
Yeah,
I mean, you could.
So
put
if
including,
you
but
had-
not limited to.
following versus including, following is 1, 2, 3, 4, including 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8.
so why wouldn't you just say including but not limited to, if you want to add it to make it?
You can do either or.
I'm just saying, because
I've
the
seen them
sentence,
both.
sentence could just hang right after section and just say. Because it mentions the following data. And then it could just be a colon right there, but you know, whatever.
I'm all, right, that's fine with me if we said including but not limited to, and then colon.
It's what allows expansion.
provides clarity.
Okay, so including but not limited to.
Level clarification.
And then a colon.
And then a call. Okay.
So on page 2, lines 5 through 7. This was an addition, I believe, based on the last board meeting and discussions. So this was not because of any follow-up comment. And this was actually part of our. Maybe not part of our commission request. So this is a new addition, just being a new addition based on discussions.
That came from the discussion from Attorney Feinstein, and
Yeah.
basically at that point in time was his argument, which is valid, that prescription drugs, there's more than just what's on the benefit side, so So we wanted at that point in time to be sure the board would have the resources to tackle it, the database and so forth, that we deal with prescription drugs in its entirety, not only a part of it.
Okay, moving on to page 3, line 13 and 14. In our conditional approval request, we had struck out that language based on a comment from OLS regarding criteria surrounding the receiving of grants and funds and contracts, etc. They still weren't very happy with that. They said, well, why are you taking it out? Because you can't do this. So this is something that we made no changes onto. And I believe Representative Merchant will be speaking to this at the actual meeting. And just trying to address that when the time comes, if it's something that the board decides to do, we will have rulemaking to add that criteria in here.
So the board has, by statute, it has the right to do this.
Yes,
Does it have the right to do it, even if it's not, if we strike it from this? Do we have to go back and get rulemaking approved to be able to do it?
for the process to do it, yes.
And the reason we're striking it out is,
Because then they want to know, well, what's the application look like, what's the form gonna look like.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
So we decided it's a bigger discussion than this last minute here.
Process.
Yeah.
How you can determine.
Next changes, same page, page 3, line 20, 24. and 40. I believe these changes were based on, they were based on OLS comments, the last go around, who are users. And in further discussions here at the last board meeting, we came up with who those users would be. It does vary a little bit in F, but B and C are the same. Also on line 21, paragraph B, we changed R to shall be and may to shall for proper rulemaking. Next page, page 4.
Just a question, just, and I'm sure it's already clarified somewhere else, but on page 2, before that, it's just. Is that referenced somewhere else so that,
Which line?
5,
Abbreviation.
the acronym just, is that mentioned somewhere else, just so we,
Oh,
It's not, but I believe in the handwritten notes I got from the attorney, he actually put that as an acronym for all pairs claim database, so I left it in there.
but
If
it's an
that-
acronym, I would think you would want to reference it somehow.
which is probably.
You mean half what it stands for.
Right.
Okay,
I would specify New Hampshire to
New Hampshire.
comprehensive health insurance. Because
Right.
New Hampshire should enable the
Oh, okay, yeah. It Probably ought to be written somewhere, so.
system, and then in parentheses, NH space DHI.
That's, thank you.
Thanks.
okay, again, for my notes, I just wanted to clarify, a New Hampshire Comprehensive Health Information System. And we're going to change the acronym to paren NH space CHIS. Hyphen in between NH and.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry to be going backwards too, but I mean, it's the same, I mean, I'll just say this, the whole idea of the rules is to give us the ability to do the work consistent with the meaning and intent of this statute.
Right.
These rules cannot and should not be drafted and written in a way that's going to constrain us, that is going to be contrary to what we expected to be doing. So I look at, for instance, I look at 3.01, and then on page 3.0101, line
Which page?
10. So it says the powers,
Which page and what number?
page 1
Okay.
on the 300s.
Yeah.
So line 10. So I look at this and I'm going forward, the board shall identify strategies that optimize spending by public payers for pharmaceutical products. And I don't see any definition of what that means. So what's a pharmaceutical? I mean, you can glean, it's what we're talking about here, but it doesn't say that. I just don't know where a lot of this came from. A lot of this language I'm curious as to where it came from.
That I think would be flashes.
Yeah.
And it could be, I mean, is it defined in the statute?
No. I don't think so.
It may be previously defined in statute.
Sure. I mean,
So are you,
I just don't want artificial impediments so that when we're trying to go about our business, somebody raises a hand and says, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, you're going well beyond the power of the rules that you've adopted. And it would be a fair objection.
Right.
So it's incumbent upon us now to be sure that we anticipate those objections when we're trying to do our work months from now.
makes sense.
That's what I'm.
Do you
one
think
thing I'm
the
saying.
back to page, the other page 1? Yeah, under definitions to add to it. 101.08. Pharmaceutical product or somewhere in there.
I mean, if we're going to use that term as constraining the authority of the board, I think it's important.
Yes.
But I look to some of the drafters too. It's not just me.
Because that actually came to my attention. I sent it out to Dr. Hazy. And that was back to a vaccine. Is it a pharmaceutical product? And yes, it is because it requires a prescription. But that was my interpretation of it, not because it was in the rule of the statute. But I think by adding it. Is
Well, would it be smarter to just have prescription drug rather than pharmaceutical products if we use that in the statute?
That would work.
So
Got a hand behind it.
brand name drug means a prescription drug marketed under generic drug means a prescription drug that are identified. Prescription drug is used over and over again in the statute.
So, so on line 10,
The pharmaceutical product is not.
so if we say to strike pharmaceutical products and insert prescription drugs,
Which are drugs requiring a prescription.
Pharmaceutical products is somewhere in the statute, used but not defined.
It's in,
Did
yeah,
you find it?
it's in RSA 126-BB:5. Roman 1A, where it says beginning of the
Right.
year 20.
So,
yeah.
22.
Yeah, so we can. just leave it alone.
Leave it alone.
Yeah,
It's in here.
great.
Okay.
that's
Good.
It seemed to me you were talking about two issues. One was the definition of pharmaceutical product, and one was the definition of optimized. Am I misinterpreting your concerns?
I was just talking about pharmaceutical products.
I'm happy with optimized.
so we can leave that one also.
Make sure. we don't get the selections.
Okay, so we're going back to the 300 page 4.
Okay,
We already addressed that.
or just let me-
Yep. So I'm looking at lines 1 and 2. So Ola's had a comment, rule language is needed, shall be also, is confidential information meant or all information? We determined after discussion, all confidential information. And then we had gone ahead and just pointed to our definition of confidential information, for clarity purposes.
Can I ask a Rosenwaldian question?
Sure.
It is should that be shall?
I was gonna ask that myself.
Beat you to it, Senator.
It absolutely should, or shall.
Shall.
It shall
And
be.
it should be and it shall be.
And that also was a concern brought up by pharma about where the data would be stored, and that was in search to address their concern. We talked.
Okay, same page, going down to paragraph B, line 23, again, we had must, and that was changed to shall. In the last page, page 5. This was a new comment on our conditional approval request. It was an legislative intent authority comment, and it stated, SB 240 established the requirement that fees and assessments be deposited into a non-lapsing dedicated fund. So this is kind of a two-part addressing of this question or this comment. We did get this comment the last go around as well. And we struck transferred to the general fund in the new paragraph G, but on lines 3 and 4, or I apologize, 4, and we added use to offset assessment fees. However, that was not what they were looking for. So we have then added this time a new paragraph F, just saying all fees, assessments, civil fines, and penalties shall be deposited into a non-lapsing fund. To make that clear, we amended G, or we just renumbered the old F2G, which states all civil fines and penalties collected by the board will be used to offset assessment fees. So we added that additional paragraph, just saying all of these funds that the board receives is going into a non-lapsing fund.
As you first described it, you said non-lapsing dedicated fund.
Yeah,
That,
yes.
but that word isn't in here.
we can add that.
And so the question about how this would work is somebody finds themselves with a penalty. They pay off the penalty. That goes into the fund, then the next year, or whatever the period's going to be, they're assessed a fee as part of being part of the industry. If they've got the penalty, the fee for the following year, I mean, that penalty could be the source of their fee 4 years into the future. Is that what's intended?
It's not going back to them individually, it's going back to mitigate fees across all registrants.
Ah, okay.
So in other words, yes, they would get a benefit.
Right.
But they wouldn't get a clean slate in the
That's
next 4
that-
years,
yeah.
right, that's,
That's what I was.
we're gonna slap your wrist, but then we're gonna
Yeah.
rub it for the next 4 years. Make you all better.
So,
Yeah, that's a great point, but it's not their fees, it's everybody's fees.
Senator Roosevelt?
The fact that the penalties and fines will mitigate the assessment seems to make them harmless. Is that what we really want? I think I'm agreeing with the previous comment. If you were fined because you violated something, so you have to pay a penalty, but then the next year your costs go down for the entire program, wouldn't you be more likely to say that's a cost of doing business that's worth it?
well,
I mean,
I-
who's saying that we can't put the civil fines and penalties into the general fund?
Oh, well, I'll ask Senator.
That's kind of a policy decision, isn't it? Because the general fund revenues offset all of the taxes and fees that are levied on everybody. So if we're talking about public payers, wouldn't you want to use this process to help all taxpayers? I guess I'm not agreeing with putting the civil fines and penalties to offset the assessment fees.
well,
And I can't explain it any better than that, I'm sorry.
The origin of this was probably definitely on my shoulders. What I wanted to be clear on is that the board, and I've seen this happen with other boards, they'll issue fines and penalties because that's the way they support the board. And the intent of fines and penalties is not to support the board, the intent for the board to be funded by assessment fees, not from penalties and civil fines. But when I added it into the rules to have it go back to the general fund, which is the civil fines and the penalties, Jelcar said we can't do that. The board
Why
can't
not?
send money.
Why can't we do it?
So from what I'm seeing, I don't have a statute in front of me, and I don't know if you, Rob,
Yeah.
can speak on it, but in SB 240. There seems to be something in there that fees and assessments are deposited into a non-lapsing dedicated fund.
You have the new statute. Did the SP. I'm saying, this SP. I would, wanting to look up on the website for the law and the law is not gonna fit.
Yeah, I just.
So that's the statutory language, but it doesn't say what their use is.
Good.
Just says where they're deposited.
Would it be,
SB 240?
would it be fair to be concerned about money that goes into the general fund? Being out of the control of the board?
Well, I hate to tell you, but the legislature can always take money out of dedicated funds, regardless,
Once I'm dedicated.
and we do.
Would it not
Remember the
be,
Governor's Commission on Alcohol and Drugs?
would it not be easier to identify that happening if it were a dedicated fund?
No, it's not any easier or harder. We just put a sentence into House Bill 2.
That's assessments. So it says in SB 450, all fees and assessments collected under this section shall be deposited in the fund. So penalty fits as an assessment, correct?
That's what y'all first said.
The fund meaning the dedicated fund for the board.
Correct.
So that's legislative.
But
So
it doesn't
And this
say
is
in
the
the
first time
statute
we-
that we have to use those fines and penalties to offset the assessment fees. We might want to use it to commission a consultant to look at something or expand the office space or
yeah,
anything. Why would
So
we
it-
put into the rules that we are limiting what we can do with the civil fines and penalties?
right. It says the fund may be used to pay administrative, technical, legal support and other costs incurred by the board under this chapter.
So we could hire a consultant,
Right. So what if we just?
but not with the civil fines and penalties.
I think we may just write G altogether.
Maybe we should just say the money goes into the fund and stop.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
And
That's
that's right,
it.
Senator Rosenwald,
Mhm.
I would say we need to basically strike G,
Yes,
just completely strike it.
And then,
because that gives the board the most flexibility.
H becomes G.
Right.
Is non-lapsing going to be a non-lapsing dedicated fund or just leave it as non-lapsing fund?
It's already, I think it's defined as a dedicated fund.
I don't,
I
in,
have
uh,
the note to add dedicated.
oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think it's,
it's not listed yet. but-
Dedicated fund.
yeah,
Yeah.
it says it's a dedicated fund under 249.
On that.
Yeah.
You may want to be clear about this. As a non-lapsing dedicated fund known as the New Hampshire Sheriff and Drug Affordability Fund. Just so we're clear about.
Yeah, which fund is, we don't want to create a new fund. We want it to go into this fund.
He's very specific which dedicated fund it's going into and not someone else's dedicated fund.
And the fund is already, well, the fund is already defined as non-lapsing and dedicated. So all we have to do is specify which fund it's going into. Right? Otherwise, it's the Department of Redundancy Department.
So you could also, as under F in a non-lapsing fund, known as the,
Or you could just name the
or
fund.
name the fund. Yeah.
Yes. Have a name. for it in the statute. So I'm sorry.
Ready? The bottom, pretty good, rainwater. Towards the bottom.
Are operating costs defined anywhere, or is that operating costs? You know, do we have any kind of guardrails on operating costs, or is it just whatever you want to spend?
Well, that's where, that was the issue that Representative Edwards brought up. That there's a cap on how much money you can spend, but not a cap on how much you can, how you spend it.
Right.
And there's no process right now for the budget to be reviewed by a third party.
And you have had your whiskey on your board. Yeah.
Very much.
And I will point out too, I don't regularly see this kind of language in rules. So normally, there's different funds in the department that different sections have in their administrative funds. We don't ever outline that.
So we could just say the board's fund. I mean, there's only one fund that's created for the board.
So the thing is, where you put it in there, they're now commenting on it. That it's gonna be specific because you have a specific non-lapsing dedicated fund. But that's something typically programs don't add into their rules.
So how would they normally do it?
It's an administrative thing, from finance. Outside of my control, I don't. We would identify something like that in the fiscal impact statement when we move forward with rules.
So can we just go through the final wording of lines 1 through 7 on page 5? Just make sure we're all okay with it.
So I have F as going to be all fees, assessments, civil fines and penalties shall be deposited into a non-lapsing dedicated fund known as the New Hampshire Prescription Drug Affordability Board Administration Fund. We are striking the following paragraph and renumbering H to G.
So the only thing that, since that fund is already defined in statute, do we need to read it? And make that simple if I just saying all fees, assessments, civil fines and penalties shall be deposited into the whatever that fund is being used.
So they were asking us to add that we
Oh, okay.
are
So
depositing to the non-lapsing dedicated fund, and the board is choosing to add the name of the fund.
that's fine.
And that's
That's it?
all the comments and changes, revisions,
Wow.
So
edits.
could I ask you a general question? then?
Sure.
Referencing what was mentioned or asked about potential unintended consequences of rules that are not inconsistent with the intent of the statute.
Mhm.
Does OLS, or is it only the board's responsibility to make sure that the rules are congruous in line with the statute?
OLF has done that for us.
Right,
That's
so
their job to do, so they can present it
it,
to
beyond may and shall, do they, you know?
100%, yes. Some of the comments that we've received and addressed have been legislative intent for the comment.
Great, okay, thank you.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
So what happens if we find that the rules are not workable? And so I presume we also could petition for rulemaking and make some amendments to these rules.
You can change your rules whenever you want.
Mhm.
If you find a week after you've adopted these and put them into practice, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. Start making a list and. we'll
It's
go back
very
to the drawing
common
board.
for boards when you start with rulemaking. You draft what you think is the reasonable set of rules, but as you work through the process, like we do in the statute, then you find you have to tweak it. Then we start with rulemaking process all over again.
Oh, yeah,
Come on.
and that's not just to boards either. I mean, I do that often. There are rules that I've been here, with the department for 5 years, that I've opened 5 years in a row. Just because something we've added or we may have taken out have just not worked.
So you don't think there's anything unusual about the promulgation and the adoption of these rules and the processes that you've seen? You don't think this has not been any more cumbersome than any others?
The only thing is that you guys need to vote on everything. But other than that, no, it'd be your typical process here, that I deal with at the department.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So at this point in time, we're down to making recommendation to accept the rules as presented and then making the vote. Second,
Move, we accept the rules as presented.
thank you, Senator. Second, please.
Yes.
Thank you. And I'll make a roll call because we have, some participating remotely. I will call on them respectfully. Senator Sherman,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes,
Attorney Payne,
Yes,
Representative Murphy.
Yes.
I chair votes yes, so it's unanimous, 5-0. He's an alternate.
I don't count.
Oh, I don't want to leave you out.
If President Murphy wasn't here. All right, so the rules are now passed. And the next thing on the agenda was the board report. I've been working with Dr. Woodward on trying to come up with a set of, or at least a report for this year. We've been working with Andrew and Emily, I believe her name, in the Department of Health and Human Services with some data built upon the requirement that we have to insert into this year's report. The 25 highest utilization, 25 highest cost, and 25 highest overall expense. So we had a meeting with them, what, 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks? Or it's been a while. To have them start assembling the reports and our data for us to include into our report. So I don't have, nor do Dr. Woodward have a report for you folks to look at and sign off on. I hope to get something out within the next 2 or 3 weeks. I've had a slight speed bump in my life. So that's where we are with the annual report. It'll probably like last year, it'll be more narrative than numerical or to the financial side of it, but I think having at least those 3 reports, working with the data analyst, will have something to put into the report that's actually grounded in some numbers as well as an error mark. That's all I have.
Senator Rosenwald,
So Rosenwald, Jen Gallagher.
you've changed your name.
Changed.
yeah. Let's see if I can
Incognito.
fix that.
Thank you, Senator. So if there's nothing else, move to adjourn. Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all for being here for short notice. And this will get presented to Delcar on the 17th. I will be there along with Ms. Rathme and also with Attorney Barrett. Awesome. Here it is. And I think Senator Rosenwald